Very brief introduction. With me are Aivars and Dobrusia Karbowiak. Huh?
Close enough.
Dobrusia is from...
Dobrusia.
Dobrusia. Dobrusia is from Poland, and Aivars from Latvia. And they are going to present their network of grassroots organizations in Eastern Europe.
Okay, first part is mine. Some time ago, we decided that we need a closer cooperation of organizations in Eastern Europe. And for me, one of the reasons was a terrible collapse of the gathering in Belgium. But, you know, it's usually like this in life, that if something bad happens, then sometimes something good can grow out of it. At this moment, we have a close cooperation of a few organizations. It's Otwarte Klatki from Poland, Užgivnuteišes from Lithuania, Lomus and Loma de Nimel from Estonia, Tuštinarvai from Lithuania, Dziwniku Breviba from Latvia, and Otevři oči from Czech Republic. And we'll talk a bit about hardships of life in Eastern Europe and how it's hard to be an activist there. But we would like to also show some successes that we were able to achieve. And probably if we were able to overcome a lot of challenges that are there, we could be even more successful. So I'll start with my own organization. It's Otwarte Klatki. We already published a few investigations into fur farming. We were able to investigate over 50 farms in all Poland. And then we also published materials from fur farms that belong to politicians and to heads of the Fur Breeders Association from Poland. We also published egg industry investigation last year, and one of the campaigns we are doing now is the restaurant outreach campaign. And when it started, for example, one girl from the north of Poland got 20 restaurants, changed their menu to add some vegan options in her city in probably 2 weeks. So it's doing really well. But there are some good things going on in some other countries as well. For example, Loma de Nimel from Estonia published in 2011 a pig farm investigation. There were also some fur investigations in Estonia and a big anti-circus campaign that followed the death of Maddie, an elephant from a German circus. A new organization from Estonia, Lomus. Well, it's a really new organization, and they are lobbying for animal circus and fur farming ban in Estonia. And they already got a lot of media attention, as far as I know. Now it's Aivars' organization, so I'll let him say a word.
Okay, a couple of words about Dzīvnieku Brīvība. It is a very young organization. It's operating since 2012, and it's the only animal rights organization in Latvia. And it's started with fur farming media campaign, which has grown nationwide quite big. We have reached an audience of 500,000 people, which is a big number for Latvia. As well, we have collected signatures in Citizen Initiative, which will bring this initiative to the parliament. And as well, we have joined Fur Free Alliance, which deals with fur worldwide, and also co-founded with other biggest environmental and animal protection organizations, Society Against Fur in Latvia. So besides this fur campaign, which is still going, and we will be bringing the initiative to Parliament this autumn, we have been participating in Stop Vivisection campaign, which was Europe-wide, and as a national coordinator, I have learned a lot about international cooperation, and this is part of experience which I will talk today. Also, we have monthly events and the anti-circus campaign going on at the moment.
And now Lithuania. So in Lithuania, there are two organizations that are active. One is UGT that also probably you know more about Lithuanian movement.
So, Association už gyvūnų teises was founded last year officially, but it as informal group it has been working for 10 years in Lithuania. They work to promote animal rights and veganism and work with media and public create public events.
And there is the newest organization in this part of Europe is Tuštinarvai, empty cages in English, and now they have organized mainly vegan outreach events, but there are some big plans. And Otevři oči, it's a Czech organization. Probably many of you know the biggest NGO in Czech Republic, Svoboda Zvířat. But there is also another organization in Czech Republic, and for example, they organized the veggie parades, and yeah, they are also very active in having info stalls on veganism and organizing Farmed Animals Day in Prague.
So, and now a bit more theoretical part, or what would I say? During these campaigns, we have been cooperating a lot among these organizations and got a lot of experience from each other. And we learned of ways how we can help each other, how can we make each other's campaigns better, and that became as a reason to create this network to put this cooperation to systematic base. And the first question is why Eastern Europe, as in the network of Eastern Europe animal rights? And first of all, Eastern Europe is different from the West in number of respects. And first of all, it's these countries are much poorer. There are not so many money in these countries, and there is less history of civil activism, or could we say?
Yeah, at some point we just recognized that we live in different societies than most of our activist friends, and because of this we feel that we have more to learn from each other sometimes than from the Western animal rights movement, because the reality in which we live is totally different. Like, for example, all the activists in Eastern Europe have to work full-time. There are no paid positions in animal rights movement. No one works for animal rights movement in this part of Europe. Also, as Aivars said, there is no tradition of animal rights. It's totally different to work in such a country than, for example, in England, where you have this long tradition and many organizations that started, I don't know, like 100 years ago. In Eastern Europe, there are some countries that have never had any animal rights organization, or countries that have just started their first organization, for example, a year ago. So this reality is totally different. And also, I think this part of Europe also suffers from like the Russian influence, the Soviet times. So we speak of societies that are not really active in general sense. Societies where being a volunteer or even donating to organization, it's something pretty new, because most of the people grew up in times where they couldn't make any decisions about their reality because they used to live in totalitarian regime, basically. We're trying to work in societies where people are quite passive because they haven't learned to believe that they can influence their governments because that was not the case not so long ago.
And besides, our situation is even a good one. We do have organizations in our countries which have started to do things and achieve some goals, but there is a huge part of Eastern Europe where is literally nothing. There is no animal rights organizations. In many countries there are not even animal welfare organizations, which actually could be to some benefit if something could start there. There would be no need to start with animal welfare organizations. There could be directly animal rights organizations. And that is the reason why we feel that there is a great opportunity to start new organizations in Eastern Europe, and we also feel that it is our obligation to help this happen.
Since for most of us, we know how it is to start organizations or start activism in countries with almost non-existent animal rights movement. I think we are also in better position to help new countries join animal rights movement because we understand the hardships. We know how it was to start, and we also, I think, we understand the reality of this part of Europe better. So our goal is to not only cooperate internally to make our campaigns better, but also to do a sort of activist outreach to new countries in the east of Europe.
And in doing so, we plan to be as effective and professional as possible. And we have, in our previous work and in cooperation with more experienced organizations who have been along for longer time, we have not only achieved good results, but also identified some lacks or some crucial points that need to be addressed, and we have categorized them broadly in 3 categories, which is namely shortage of human resources, shortage or lack of information, and lack of material resources, which we will be talking now. So perhaps the most challenging part for new organizations is to get activists. Like, if nothing has been happening, if those ideas are not around, then to get a group of people capable to work on campaigns, it's quite difficult. And in a way, you need already to have some successes before in order for people to know the idea and want to join. And even then, to find skilled professionals who can actually perform a quality job is not an easy task. And
I think this is what made it easy for our organization at Farteklatki to start, is that we already had some animal rights movement. So at some point you could just talk to some people that were already interested if they want to start a new organization that would have this and these goals. But if there is no movement in your country, then it's even hard to start because you don't know who you can talk to.
And of course,
if you have made any campaign, then it's easier for people to join you because they already know you, that they already know what you're about. But if there is no movement and you haven't done anything, and it's hard to do anything if you don't have any people to help you, then even the recruiting, this first recruitment of this first group that is supposed to start something, it's very, very hard.
Yeah, and especially so because professional campaigns need so many types of specialists, and one could learn some skills to do some moderately acceptable job, but there still need to be many learners to get this. For example, it turns out we can help each other in initial stages, and in fact we were helped out by, for example, we missed a website and we had no web designer whatsoever, and So Oike Dailaimil was there to create a website for us at that point. And you could see this as a outsourcing of some work, but if we look at this broader, then maybe it's not outsourcing, maybe it's, we can talk about division of labor, because division of labor brings about a qualitative increase of productivity. And if it makes sense to divide labor within organization, why shouldn't it make sense to divide labor among organizations? If we have 7 organizations in our network, do we really need to have like 7 professional web designers, 7 experienced project writers, 7 experienced graphic designers, 7 biologists who consult us on professional level, and so on? Does every organization need to be independent, or can we divide some of the labor? Another issue for a new organization is access to information, such as when we are doing campaigns, we need to have access to industry data, to information about laws, effective messages and arguments against industries. And where can we get this information? And one could say that we could always ask others. There have been so many organizations doing similar campaigns before, but it turns out it's not so easy to ask others, because most professional people are also almost always very busy, and there is no commitment to help. There is maybe a friendly connection you could use on personal level, but there is no formalized structure that you can ask your questions and get answers effectively.
Yeah. One of our experiences in cooperation with Western animal rights movement was that unless you personally know some people from other organizations, it's really hard for you to get any information on, for example, how to design a campaign, or how to effectively lobby, or basically any information you might need. So we think it's something that probably should be solved in the long run.
And as a result of not being able to access this information effectively, the work is repeated. We are doing the same work as has been done before, and perhaps not a single time, but many times, again and again. And it's needless to say that it's really time-consuming and extremely inefficient. And
yeah. And what we wanted to also achieve with creating the network is really to start this culture of sharing between organizations. Yeah, sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing experience, and even sometimes sharing activists.
And sharing strategies, fundraising strategies, tools, algorithms, and everything, that know-how, and not only resources. Yeah. And one thing which we came to realize, that most campaigns are actually quite typical. There are some original campaigns out there, but most of them are very similar. So how many types of campaigns are there? We believe there are not many, and there is no huge differences how you can do them. There are efficient ways and inefficient ways, and in the end there are only some types of efficient campaigns, and then there are organizations and activists who have this know-how, who have great experience in doing it. So maybe it's good if this is also shared.
And if you don't really have an access to the know-how of some of the organization, there is this kind of information bias where you just start doing the campaigns that are most visible, but not necessarily most effective. This is something that I've learned after being at the first Fair Free Alliance meeting, when I actually found out by talking to some more experienced activists in getting companies to become fur-free is that the most successful are those quiet campaigns where you just meet them and talk to the managers. But if you know, well, as soon as you know it, it's obvious. But if someone does not have this knowledge, then probably what they see about how you can influence some companies is only the loud shouting in front of the shops, because this is what's visible. So you will, if we don't share this knowledge, we actually make people make mistakes because they only see the most visible actions and not necessarily the most effective ones.
Yeah, and another thing, why isn't information normally shared? Like, of course, it's easy to see that it's beneficial, but the reason is that sharing information makes extra work, a little bit of extra work, but it's still extra steps. And if you think about when you are doing campaign, maybe you just do some action and then you just finish. But then there are more steps to do, like to analyze, give feedback, formalize, categorize, and package this all knowledge together in a pack, which could be easily provided to everyone else. But it's often not done because of short-term benefit of saving time. But at the end, we end up spending huge amounts of time as a movement to repeat the same.
And as soon as you start thinking about movement as a whole, then it really starts making sense. If you only think about work you do in your own organization or only if you're in your own country, then maybe sharing is not that important. But if you think about it in this broad sense, then sharing information is like really, really crucial.
Yeah, our mission is worldwide. We are not competitors, and sometimes it happens that helping others is more effective or more valuable than doing something for yourself, and that's really the perspective we should, as a movement, get into our minds. And that's why in Near Network we aim for proper communication procedures that take these aspects seriously, and so some obligations become mandatory, and it's not anymore a free choice whether to share or not, because we know it's effective, so we should. And we aim for efficiency of the network, not that of the single organization. But if we look closer, there is not really a contradiction. By helping others, you are helping yourself, because when you prepare information for sharing with others, you need to think clearly about the structure. You need to understand the thing yourself, and you make this information also reusable for yourself. And if many organizations would do this, then sometimes you don't even need to start researching anything. You get the package from someone else.
We also recognize that it helps us internally because sometimes activists leave the organization. So if they had to share most of the work that they have been doing, it stays also inside of the organization. Because I think I also had this experience that sometimes when people leave the organization, all the work that they have been doing also kind of disappears.
Yes, and if those rotation is indeed a serious problem for animal rights activism, because many people are coming and going, and that's just a fact in our movement. And so if we have this clearly structured information which is readily available, then if you get a new volunteer, new activist, you can present this data in its totality, in structured form, and any new person would very quickly understand the field in which he's working in, not like need to find some lost documents in some emails or somewhere in the internet on dead websites or whatever, go all around to get this picture on its own, again repeating the work which is already done in the same organization. But finally, we also would like to say a couple of words about material resources. and how we like them. Life in Eastern Europe is a bit problematic, as you could probably see on this graph. So that's one aspect, that the minimum salaries which are shown here are on almost an order of magnitude different. Actually more than an order of magnitude if you compare Romania and Luxembourg. But, so salaries are low here, and social security system, as Dobrusia mentioned, is also very weak, and it's difficult to avoid working to do activism. And often people work full-time or even more merely to survive.
And it has a huge influence on our activists, because not only all the activists are forced to work full-time, and they are only able to do activism in their free time that is left after working for 40 hours a week. It's also that it's quite hard to actually get any donations, because if you live in a country where most of people are struggling to survive on a monthly basis, then donating to animal rights organizations might not be their first choice of spending money.
And also it's more difficult even to do lobby work, because governments are hysterical about money, about workplaces, and they are more eagerly protecting industries. And so this lack of resources and money in Eastern Europe comes together to multiple problems for animal rights activism. But luckily, animal rights movement has money in the movement, and luckily there is a substantial degree of solidarity as well. After all, we are not here for the profit, we are here for the animals. And
yeah, we also know that actually there are some organizations that recognize this this thing, and in fact, in my opinion, many of the organizations in Eastern Europe wouldn't even start without help from Anima from Denmark and Oikeutta Eläimillä from Finland. So they're sitting there in the first row. So we also admit that there are organizations that really understand this, but it's also not that many organizations that we can mention that really helped us. And I think helping new organizations in Eastern Europe or in any parts of the world with almost non-existent animal rights movement, it has more or less the value of investing in startups. I mean, it's like you get a lot of value for the money you give, because it's like if you already have an active movement somewhere, then some sums of money don't really change much. But if the movement is almost non-existent, then if you're able to start something there, then at some point it might become independent, and then any of your help or any money you put there just multiplies.
Yeah, you just put some money to start organization, and the organization starts to accumulate its own money with time, and otherwise this money wouldn't be there for organization, but once it's started, it's there for organization, for the movement. And
yeah, so at least my organization is now doing quite well in terms of finances, but I know that we wouldn't have started without some financial help in the very beginning. So I think it's also important to understand that all the 50 farms that have been investigated or the media campaigns that we have done wouldn't be possible if we hadn't got some help, some financial help from some organizations. It would just be impossible to do.
Yeah, and we, as in our experience, our organization started because almost by accident we went to Estonian animal rights gathering, and that's where we got the basic idea what it is, animal rights movement, and what is going on there. There was no knowledge in Latvia before. We had some, I don't know, pretty vague intuitions at best. And so that's why we think that maybe in this other part of Eastern Europe where is nothing happening, there might be the same deficit of information, and maybe there are no organizations only because of trivial reasons that no one has been exposed to those ideas before, no one has thought about them.
And we are actively searching for options of starting new organizations in Eastern Europe. So we are actively contacting people from countries with no animal rights organizations to actually ask them if they need any help and how we can help them to start.
And thinking of all those East European countries where there's nothing and so many people live there, we think that it's really effective to invest in this part of the world to try to achieve independent and self-reliant organizations in the future.
And especially when animal industries are moving to the east, I think it's also important to move the movement to the east as well.
So, as Dobrusia already said, we aim to radically change the situation in Eastern Europe, and through professional and effective activism. And as we live in a deeply speciesist society, which is disproportionate to the speciesism is disproportionate to everything we do, on a massive scale. We cannot afford to be anything less than effective. And if we are not here for a hobby, then we probably should constantly look for an opportunity to grow all directions, both nationally and internationally, to do more campaigns in more locations and accumulate more funds. And if you forgive me the metaphor, we need to grow like a cancer. And so in NEAR network, we look forward to implement all these principles that we talked about: division of labor, communication, sharing, and other good principles which are simple but often overlooked. And if we manage to do this, there might be a good future coming for the East.
So here is a contact to both of us. I'm the first one, Dobrusia, and Aivars. We are both coordinators of the NEAR network. There is a third coordinator. I don't know if he's here. It's Martin from Estonia. Here, he is the third guy in the board.
And I would like to just note that although we have talked about Eastern Europe, maybe these principles are of more universal applicability. And as a grassroots organization, we have learned how to be self-reliant and do everything by ourselves, but maybe we have been too self-reliant and overlooked the possibility to cooperate. And maybe it's about time we really start working together as a movement.
Yeah. I think when I said a lot about hardships of living in Eastern Europe, but the thing is that we were forced to cooperate because otherwise it would be hard to do much in this part of the world. But maybe some countries would like to voluntarily also cooperate without being forced to do that.
Thank you, I guess.
Any questions? Or comments?
This is Kim Stillwood. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really interesting. Are there any social movements in Eastern Europe which are successful? I ask that question not just to see what there is out there, as to whether you can attach yourself in some way to them to benefit from them. And by the way, I'd like to talk with you afterwards as well.
Thank you for your question. I think I will give microphone to Dobrusia because in Baltics the situation is quite poor. Maybe there is in Poland.
Okay, that was also an answer. So yeah, at least in Aivars' opinion, the situation is quite poor in the Baltic countries. I would say that in Poland, I think the feminist movement is doing well, but also we have like a ban on abortion, and so yeah, I think that there are some movements that are quite successful, but I think also it's hard to answer this question if you don't have any like. It depends on which countries do we compare successes to. So probably if I wanted to compare Polish feminist movement to the Swedish one or to American one, it's not that successful, but it's one of the movements that I think are quite active. Now one of the most visible movements in Poland is the movement for like citizen rights to make decisions about cities. But I think in general we don't really have this attitude of activism yet. I think it's still better in Poland because there is still not so much Soviet influences left, but it's probably the more to the east, the worse it is for any social movements.
More questions?
I think we have, from Olga Telemille, we have learned a lot from the Eastern European countries that we have the privilege to cooperate with. And it seems that it is time for us from the Western countries to drop the arrogance and that sort of attitude towards the East and see what these people are achieving and try to learn from the professionalism and the attitude that the people there have and how they are taking the movement seriously and not maybe because they have to, but because they also lack this kind of like historical idea that we have in the movement that we don't need to be a professional or we don't need to try to become mainstream. There's so many things that we have learned from you. So I kind of wanted to make a comment back for receiving the thank you from the States to also give back our thank you for you. Aivars has been to Finland to talk about their work in Latvia, and we have been really inspired because of that. And also we have gotten lots of back from all the groups that we have cooperated with.
Thank you. I just have a very short comment. Aivars, I think, said something about it, about the lack of activism history being also not only a drawback, but also a privilege of Eastern Europe. I think that not only we can learn from the mistakes that have already been made in the Western countries and try to be effective without wasting time, and not only can we start animal rights organizations without having to establish the animal welfare organizations first, but also, I'm sorry, I forgot what I wanted to say. Yes, I feel that it's a privilege to have a lack of history in animal rights, because then the the attitude of the governments towards the animal rights activists, it's not so defensive. Animal rights activists are not seen, at least in Lithuania, they are not yet seen as terrorists or something that's unwanted in the public, because there hasn't been any history on environmental or animal rights so-called terrorism.
Don't worry, it took us only 2 years to actually make politicians not like us anymore.
It means you're doing a good job.
Then thank you very much, you two.